Grand opening, grand closing.
Welcome, my friends, my family, my fellow gamers. It's your only friend these YouTube streets, Puerto77. And I'm here back with another video and to level set some education on here. So the big news is, as we all learned, is Microsoft completed its acquisition of ABK, Activision Blizzard King. So now they are now part of the Xbox family. I want to focus on the post reactions and conversations that is being had, mainly in terms of what Sony needs to do and to respond. But before we can actually have that conversation, before I'm able to discuss my point, we have to look at certain things that I think the community is over exaggerating, fear mongering, or just making way too many assumptions rather than the merit of the fact. The reality is, with this acquisition, right, this is not an industry problem. I keep hearing this. I keep hearing this whole thing of this begins the acquisition war. The industry is in trouble. This is going to make the gaming industry pretty much all these negative conversations. When in reality, this is not an industry issue. This is nothing more than just what Microsoft is doing to bolster its Xbox division, right? The fear of subscription taking over the industry, the fear of subscriptions watering down AAA gaming in the industry is unfounded simply because within the gaming industry, most are not or reluctant to adopt this model. This is not the same as the movie industry or the music industry, which quickly adopted the model once they saw somebody else do it. We already seen Sony, one of the big players, says this model doesn't work the way Microsoft doing. Sony has said time and time again that putting day one big AAA blockbusters cannot be sustainable with its subscription service. So you know Sony's not about that. Nintendo, you already see how they move. They don't even want to have the conversation. They're like, don't even bother us with this nonsense. You go on with that. You don't see Valve trying to change Steam into a subscription service. You don't see Epic Game Store trying to change their model into a subscription service. This is strictly Microsoft moving in this direction simply because they don't really have a choice in the matter. The reality is the model that Sony is successful in, that Nintendo is successful in, and that the industry has grown because of this model, Xbox is not successful in it. They can't sell enough consoles to really tap into the market. The last time they were able to do it was during 360, and they've been going downhill ever since. They can't release enough hardware or cannot sell enough hardware to convince people to play the majority of games on their platform. So Microsoft went with a different strategy, which is subscription service. Sure, they are mimicking what they see from Netflix and everyone. They even call themselves the Netflix of gaming. But they're trying this model so that way through a subscription service, they gain users. But to gain users, they need as much devices as possible so that way people have access to subscription, to subscribe, to gain those users. That is a Microsoft thing. That is not an industry thing. Everybody keeps saying that the industry is going to change. No one else is really caring to do that because more often than not, the big players are saying this is not sustainable for AAA gaming. Take-Two is saying it. Sony has said it. Don't even bother Nintendo with it. So for the most part, the majority of industry is not all in. The only ones that try to take advantage of Microsoft's subscription service has mostly been indie developers. Because this is probably the best way in a situation where they can't get mass marketing and most of their games are being masked or dominated by AAA marketing. This is a good way for them to get noticed. Right? This is also a good way for catalog games, games that no longer sell, they're collecting dust on the shelf or they're lost in the digital store. This is a good way to get some money and bring them back to life. But as a model for new AAA games, the majority industry has not co-signed this. It is primarily a Microsoft thing. So that's not an industry problem. Everybody else is moving the way they move. Microsoft will move the way they want to move. So all this talk and fear mongering about AAA games being in trouble and all that stuff, that's Microsoft wrong. They have to handle that. AAA gaming on Sony will be fine. AAA gaming from third-party partners will be fine because you'll have the PC platform, you have Steam, Epic Game Store, and for consoles, you have PlayStation. And if Nintendo creates their next Switch with comparable hardware or decent hardware to take advantage to some level of the games, you will also have Nintendo to support the industry. So the industry will be fine. This whole thing needs to be focused on Microsoft and what they want to do. And they know as a console brand, they can't really compete. Phil Spencer said it himself. You can't out-console Sony or Nintendo. So he and the company is moving a different way, which is subscription service, which is specifically a Microsoft situation, a Microsoft move. It's not an industry move. It is Microsoft's move. And that's okay. That's how they want to move. So then the real question is, what does Sony do? What does PlayStation do? Right? The initial reaction from everybody is they got to start acquiring stuff. They got to start acquiring stuff. They got to buy stuff. They got to go into this money war. Before I make my case on what they should do, I need to level set and show you a video. I've shown this video on my podcast, and a lot of people didn't know about a gentleman named Simon Sinek. Great. He does a lot of lectures and works on how to be a better leader in the industry, right? So a lot of people pay him money to do these lectures and understand what makes a great leader in the business industry versus just being a boss or a manager, right? And he breaks down why some companies are so successful and how they do their vision and stuff like that. Great guy. I suggest you look at all his stuff. But I'm going to present to you specifically this video. Some of you already seen it. If you saw my podcast, many of you are not. This is going to be the first time you've seen it. Pay attention to what he says, right? And then you're going to understand, from my point of view, what I think Sony needs to really do, right, going forward. So I'm going to set this up for you. Give me one moment. All right. I'm going to pause. I'm going to mute my mic. Let's enjoy the video, but pay attention. Listen to what he says.
I spoke at a leadership summit for Microsoft. I also spoke at a leadership summit for Apple. Now, at the Microsoft summit, I would say 70% of the executives, and this was under the Steve Ballmer days, I would say about 70% of the executives spent about 70% of their presentations talking about how to beat Apple. At the Apple summit, 100% of the executives spent 100% of their presentations talking about how to help teachers teach and how to help students learn. One was obsessed with their competition, the other one was obsessed with where they're going. So at the end of my presentation at Microsoft, they gave me a gift. They gave me the new Zune, which was the competitor to the iPod Touch when it was a thing, right? And I have to tell you, this piece of technology was spectacular. It was beautiful. The user interface was incredible. The design was amazing. It was intuitive. It was one of the most beautiful, elegant pieces of technology I'd ever seen, right? Now, it didn't work with iTunes, which is an entirely different problem. I couldn't use it. But that's something else. I'm sitting in the back of a taxi with a senior Apple executive, sort of employee number 12 kind of guy, and I decide to stir the pot. And I turn to him and I say, you know, I spoke at a Microsoft summit and they gave me their new Zune, and I have to tell you, it is so much better than your iPod Touch. And he turned to me and said, I have no doubt. Conversation over. Because the infinite player isn't playing to be number one every day with every product. They're playing to outlast the competition. If I had said to Microsoft, oh, I've got the new iPod Touch, it's so much better than your new Zune, they would have said, can we see it? What does it do? We have to see it. Because one is obsessed with their competition, the other is obsessed with why they do what they do, the other is obsessed with where they're going. And the reason Apple frustrates their competition is because secretly, they're not even competing against them. They're competing against themselves. And they understand that sometimes you're a little bit ahead, and sometimes you're a little bit behind. And sometimes your product is better, and sometimes you're not. But if you wake up every single morning and compete against yourself, how do I make our products better than they were yesterday? How do I take care of our customers better than we did yesterday? How do we advance our cause more efficiently, more productively than we did yesterday? How do we find new solutions to advance our calling, our cause, our purpose, our belief, our why every single day? What you'll find is over time, you will probably be ahead more often. Those who play the infinite game understand it's not about the battle, it's about the war. And they don't play to win every day. And they frustrate their competition until their competition drops out of the game. Every single bankruptcy, almost every merger and acquisition is basically a company saying we no longer have the will or the resources to continue to play, and we have no choice to either drop out of the game or merge our resources with another player so that we can stay in the game. That's what that is. And if you think about the number of bankruptcies and mergers and acquisitions, it's kind of proof that most companies don't even know the game they're in. You want to be a great leader, start with empathy. You want to be a great leader, change your perspective and play the game you're actually playing.
All right. Let me put this back up. All right. So you see what he said, Simon Sinek, right? Made some interesting point. Notice how he touched on companies that don't fully understand the game that they're playing. They either go bankrupt or they merge with other resources to keep going, right? The point of this is many of you are looking at that Sony needs to look lateral and see what Microsoft is doing. And therefore, since Microsoft's doing acquisitions, look laterally and do what they do. When in reality, they need to look forward in their own vision. Just like how Apple, use an example with their iPhones, when they removed the 3.5 millimeter jack, that was an L. Just like he said, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Everybody was looking at Apple, oh, this is an L. How am I, if I don't have a 3.5 millimeter jack, how am I supposed to listen to my phone with music and all that while at the same time charging? There's only one charging port, and it was all this L. Over time, though, people started adopting earbuds, and earbuds became all the craze. Now, the high-end phones don't have a 3.5 millimeter jack. If you see a high-end phone with that jack, you don't look at it as high-end. You'll look at it as like, ooh, we got a jack? What's going on here? Right? Apple played the infinite game. They looked forward. They saw what was going. They saw we're going to have AirPods. We're going to have Bluetooth wireless beats. That's the focus. The focus isn't this cord. Look forward. So they took an initial L, but now look. Who actually has corded earphones or whatever? Not many people use it. The ones who still use it, like even I use it once in a while, mostly because of content. Like if I make a video to upload a content, I use the corded because the mic's a little bit better. But most of the other than that, I don't touch that cord. I got my Beats, I got my AirPods, you see? That's where you focus going forward. You don't look laterally. For PlayStation, right, we can't ask them to look laterally. They have to look forward. Sometimes they're going to take an L. For example, the new all digital Slim is $50 more expensive. A lot of people are wondering, why does it cost more? Oh, this is an L. Yada, yada, yada. This is weird. Bad pricing. You're paying more for the Slim when it was $400. All this negative stuff. But when you look forward, right? Microsoft, well, let me bring this back a bit. Microsoft is looking laterally. Oh, Sony releasing all digital high-end stuff. It's the same spec as that high-end. So we're going to do the same thing too. This time we're going to make an all digital Xbox Series X. They're looking lateral. They're doing what Sony does. Sony went forward and said, hey, we're still going to do the all digital, but some people may have regret purchases. Some people may have initially thought they want all digital, but then maybe it restricted their friends from buying games physically, or maybe their friend says, hey, I got some physical games you can have. And because they were all digital, they couldn't take advantage of that. So you know what? Let's look forward. And let's make it all digital with the option to go disc if you choose to. Look forward. They keep pushing forward. Some people are bashing the PlayStation Portal for these unique earbuds that tie to it. And they're saying, oh, this is the Apple strategy. But who knows, in a couple of years, with the premium experience you get, maybe gamers will be like, you know what, this was the right call because this actually provides a better experience for gaming instead of a general one-size-fits-all. Or maybe they'll take an L. Just like he says, some days you do good, some days you do bad, right? But you keep aiming forward, you're going to end up winning the long game. So in my opinion, where does Sony go forward in all this? And to me, one strategy is their first party studios. To me, that's the core function of their console and their brand. Okay. Sure. They're trying to expand into more areas to make more money, such as the live service games. But people are treating that decision of Sony saying, hey, we need to make our own live service games to make more money, as if their strategy of storytelling and first party games is a failure. No, you can do two things at the same time. You can have success making single player, story driven, character development type games that we love. And you can see the potential make more monies by catering to another audience with these multiplayer games and live service games. You can do both. Sony already discussed this. Their first party games is very successful. In fact, that's the reason why, Sony, in terms of first party, has grown bigger. They've created amazing games and their games are very successful. But that doesn't mean you just stop and only focus on that. They also want to focus on the live service games. But in the environment where Microsoft acquired more studios and people are asking, hey, what does Sony do? The answer is Sony needs to respond. No, Sony does not need to respond. They don't need to do anything. They don't need to look lateral. What they need to do is look forward and recognize what they have and how can they grow what they have. And in my opinion, the one thing that they should do is grow their own first party studios, right? As Sony attempts to cater to a bigger audience, more people to cater to, more people to go on PlayStation, right? More people to experience their first party games. They're going to have to internally grow their own studios to meet that demand. You can start out as a small restaurant catering to 10 to 20 people, right? And you have your kitchen staff and you have your waiter staff and you have your room staff. But if you want to go beyond 10 to 20 people and cater to 50 to 60 people at any given point in your restaurant, then you need to expand the restaurant for more tables and more seatings. And you're going to need more cooks and more kitchen staff. And you're going to need more waiters and waitresses. All of that has to grow with the demand of the people. Okay. With PlayStation first party games being such in high demand, a studio cannot be one studio that releases one game every 5 to 6 years. They need to be able to release their great games in a faster cadence. Generally, let's say every 3 years. Now, I already know the feedback. Games take time to make. There is no way for a studio to make a game and release games every 3 years. That is incorrect. Now, I'm going to show you and visualize what I am talking about, because I don't think people understand when I explain staggered development, whatever. So I'm going to show you a visualization of what I'm talking about. And we're going to start with this. Give me a second. Give me one moment as I show you this. I need to let me put this over here. All right. Here we go. All right. So as you can see for the screen, I'll make this full screen. Okay. Let's pretend, I don't even know why that timer's there, but let's pretend a simple chart, right? You see on the bottom 3 projects. Project 1, Project 2, Project 3, right? Okay. So you got each project, right? Let's say this is a new studio. Let's say Sony Bend. Let's say Sony Bend is this studio we're talking about. And let's say Sony Bend has 3 teams. Okay? So for their first project, all 3 teams, right? Or let me orientate you with the graph. The left side of the screen where you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, those are the years. How many years of development? On the bottom is each project. Project 1 is a game, project 2 is a game, project 3 is a game. All right? So all 3 teams are working on project 1. The halfway mark between 0 and year 1, that's like the start of development. Okay? So now all 3 teams are working on this one project. Now we move into 3 years deep into the project. So by the 3rd year, team 2 is going to splinter off, leaving team 1 and team 3 to work on project 1. Team 2 is now starting development on project 2. And they're going to keep doing that. Now you fast forward another 3 years. Project 1 is pretty much complete, getting ready to launch. Project 2 is 3 years deep, right? And project 3 is being started. So team 3 is leaving project 1 to start their own project in project 3. So that is beginning. Team 2 is working on project 2, which is 3 years deep. Then team 1 finishes it off. The game is launched. They now merge with project 2 to help team 2 with the next 3 years of that development, right? So now you got team 1 and team 2 working on project 2. Team 3 is working on project 3. Project 1 is launched. Project 4 is now being in concept. Team 1 and Team 2 finish Project 2. Team 3 is still going into year 3 now of Project 3. And then finally, Project 4 has now begun by Team 1. Team 2 launched Project 2. And now they merge over to Project 3 with Team 3 so they could finish it. And then we're back to the very beginning. And this cycle keeps happening over and over and over. Okay. Now, the thing about this project, the thing about this is for them, they're taking 6 years to make games. The games are taking time. It takes time to make games, and they are taking their time. They're taking a full 6 years to make their games. So from a developer standpoint, you guys are getting what's being told. It takes time to make games. They got the time to make games. 6 years. But from a consumer perspective, from our perspective, we're getting a game every 3 years. That doesn't mean the game's being developed in 3 years. The games are still taking 6 years to make. We, from our standpoint, from this one studio, they're releasing a new game every 3 years. All right. Now, this is just a quick brainstorm that I did off the top of my head. Obviously, the experts will fine tune it. Every game doesn't have to be a AAA game. It could be a AA game or something, right? But I hope you guys now understand what I am talking about. If Sony doesn't grow their current studios to meet the demand and output of their audience, they're in trouble. Okay? As you can see this year, from a first party perspective, they really haven't done nothing. Insomniac got their game, and you got MLB The Show. And that's pretty much it, right? You also got Burning Shores, whatever, right? Sony's first party studio is their thing. They cannot just sit on their laurels and just keep doing what they're doing. They need to expand the studios, give them the resources and the workforce to make the games that we, the consumers, want. As you can see from what I showed you, you can release games every 3 years, and yet the game still takes 6 years to make. You just have to provide the resources and manage the workforce to do it. And it can be done. That, to me, is one of the things Sony should be focusing on, working on as a priority. Get all their great studios, right? All these fantastic studios that we love, and augment them. Give them the ability to manage multiple projects. Give them the ability to release games every 3 years while still taking the 6 years necessary to make these quality game of the year bangers. That's moving forward. That's playing the infinite game. For those of you asking to do what Microsoft does and go on a buying spree, Sony doesn't even have the money for that to that level. They're not a $2 trillion company. They're not even a half a $1 trillion company. They're not even a $500 billion company. So you're asking them to pay attention to Xbox or Microsoft. Pay attention to the keynote speech I showed you. Let them focus on them. There's going to be L's, which we've seen, and there's going to be victories. But if they can focus on what they do best and evolve and expand what they do best, in the long game, just like Apple, you're not going to beat them. There's no amount of acquisition that's going to help you out console PlayStation. This is PorterRock77, your only friend these YouTube streets. Please like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoyed another episode of the PlayStation Method. You guys take care.